I want to share a deeply troubling experience that unfolded in my life, one that I never imagined could happen in any family, let alone the one I had married into. My brother-in-law was deliberately urinating on my personal possessions for months, targeting me in a shockingly deliberate way. When I finally discovered exactly why he was doing this, it revealed a truly horrifying piece of familial history that utterly destroyed my marriage. It is almost unbelievable to reflect on. I am a 29-year-old female, and my husband, whom I will call Ted, is 34. We have been romantically involved for nearly 10 years, a relationship that began in our college days. We met during our early college years, hit it off fairly quickly, and dated consistently all the way through our undergraduate programs. I ended up graduating just a bit before Ted, and because I wanted to see the world a little, I took a semester off to travel. That was supposed to be a short separation, while Ted finished his remaining classes. Our plan was to move to a brand new state right after. Unfortunately, Ted had some complications with his final coursework, and had to retake several classes, which thwarted our original timeline. After returning from my travels, I found myself with nowhere immediate to live, so it made sense to move in with Ted and his older brother, Ash, who was 32 at that time. They were already sharing a place. This arrangement was meant to be a temporary one while Ted concluded his schooling, but of course, life had other plans. Before I made the move, I asked Ted to be absolutely certain it was acceptable for me to bring my beloved male cat along, because Ted and Ash already had an elderly dog in the household. Ash apparently saw no problem with it. He told Ted I was welcome, and he was fine with having my cat there. However, only around 3 weeks after I settled in, I picked up on a powerful scent of urine in our bedroom. I found myself repeatedly investigating every corner of that room, because it was a pungent smell I couldn't ignore. My cat, who was incredibly well trained to use the toilet, would never spontaneously mark my belongings or the floor, so I was already skeptical that he was the culprit. The dog, meanwhile, could barely handle stairs due to old age, so he was not making his way upstairs to our room. The situation was baffling. Then, a few days later, I discovered an item of my clothing on the floor, soaked with pee, and it completely reeked. That baffled me even more. I asked Ted if he had any clue about it, and he claimed ignorance. Over the next few weeks, it happened again and again. The odor of urine would hover in our bedroom, sometimes saturating my clothes or other items. Ted continued to act confused, and I was incredibly frustrated and equally perplexed. This crisis dragged on for roughly 3 months, usually happening twice each week, which was frequent enough to drive me insane. I reached a breaking point where I confronted Ash directly, asking if he might be responsible, or if he was, at the very least, letting their old dog wander upstairs on random occasions, which Ash denied doing. By that juncture, I was at my wit's end and found no consistent pattern or logical explanation. I started meticulously picking up and storing away every piece of clothing so nothing was left on the floor, but soon my shoes, decorative throw pillows, and occasional personal effects also started smelling suspiciously like pee. I couldn't shake the feeling that something deliberately malicious was going on. In one of my tearful episodes, Ash casually put forth a theory. He suggested my cat, being male, might be marking his territory in a new environment, as male cats sometimes do. Although cat owners know cat urine has a distinctive ammonia-like odor, different from human urine, Ash's words initially planted a small seed of doubt or confusion in me. Yet, deep down, I trusted my cat completely. I knew him to be impeccably trained and gentle, not prone to territorial marking. Determined to solve the mystery definitively, I set up a camera in our bedroom. I was paying rent. I had the right to install a small camera in my space, and Ted was aware. It felt like a private detective scenario in my own home, which was surreal, but I had to find concrete evidence to prove what was causing the repeated stains. And indeed, the footage revealed the utterly horrifying sight. Ash himself sneaking into the room, unfastening his pants, and peeing directly on my possessions. There are scarcely words to convey the revulsion and shock I felt the moment I watched that camera footage. The moment I realized that a grown man, my husband's own brother, was doing something so degrading on purpose was a heavy blow. Instantly, I knew I could not spend another minute in that environment. I gathered my cat and whatever items I could transport quickly, then left to stay with a friend. Ted, who still had to finish his degree, dealt with Ash on his own. I refused to confront him in person. Honestly, it turned my stomach to imagine speaking to him. It was unbelievably disturbing. Once I was safely out of that apartment, I tried to put some emotional distance from the entire fiasco. Following that incident, I steered clear of Ash. I wanted nothing whatsoever to do with him. Even though he was later the best man at our wedding, which is hard to believe considering the history, I mostly avoided him at any subsequent family gatherings. We basically did not speak for a long time. Then the pandemic happened. Ash was unfortunate enough to lose his job and his apartment, and he wound up in a dire financial spot. He reached out to me and Ted, expressing his desperation and asking if he could move in with us. Although the fiasco with the P had happened quite some time earlier, I hadn't forgotten or forgiven it. I was adamant that he would not cross the threshold of my home again. He was 25 years old when he peed on my belongings. He wasn't a clueless teenager. He was an adult making a disgusting choice. But suddenly, the entire extended family was coming at me, calling me heartless for refusing him shelter amidst a global crisis. They insisted I had an obligation to help him, or they said I was petty for clinging to old grudges. To complicate matters, Ash apparently also now had a cat of his own, and everyone kept telling me, if you block Ash, you're also turning away an innocent cat. They made it equally clear that I couldn't offer to only take in his cat without also giving Ash a place to stay. In other words, take them both or take none. From my vantage point, there was absolutely no chance I would let that man anywhere near my home after what he did, repeatedly, over months. Unsurprisingly, the family thought I was extremely stubborn and cruel for that. Each of them texted or called, pressuring me to relent. However, it didn't help that they were not the ones who had endured the humiliation of having their clothes and shoes doused with pee. It was as if they couldn't fathom how violating that truly was. Meanwhile, Ted was torn. He despised what Ash did, but he also felt conflicted about leaving his brother stranded, especially with the job market so dismal in other parts of the country. Where we live, the employment outlook for Ash's line of work could potentially be better, so from Ted's perspective, letting him move in might be the only way to help him get back on his feet. Edit number 1. First, let me acknowledge the supportive folks who have read this account so far. I'm in the midst of a work shift, so my time to reply to comments is limited, but I promise to respond as I can. Many of you asked if Ash was in therapy. My mother-in-law has insisted that after the peeing episode, he saw a therapist, and that was how everyone discovered the underlying cause. He believed I threatened his close relationship with Ted. In other words, he tried to sabotage our bond out of jealousy, presumably aiming to drive me away. Ultimately, it only drove Ted to freeze Ash out for a time. The therapist apparently told him that healing and remorse required him to attempt making amends with Ted. They eventually reconnected, and I kept my distance. You might also be wondering why Ash was in our wedding. Well, the wedding was more about pleasing our parents than me or Ted. My parents badly wanted a big celebration, being that I was the first of my sisters to wed, and Ted's parents wanted the same. Because Ted has many brothers, they all lined up as groomsmen, and I had my sisters as bridesmaids. We felt we couldn't exclude Ash if we were including every other brother. Ted offered me the chance to say no, but Ash and Ted had been best friends once, and part of me wanted to take the high road and avoid drama. So I just refused to take photos with Ash or let him give any speeches. That was our compromise. Another question is why none of the other family members take him in if they are so worried about him being homeless. Well, everyone else is located on the West Coast. Only Ted and I are on the East Coast. Because of Ted's field, job opportunities are better here. Hence, the family is pushing us to house Ash, because they figure it'll make it easier for him to find a solid job. I suggested the possibility of one of the older siblings paying his rent, or giving him some type of donation for an apartment, but the extended family places heavy emphasis on forgive and forget. They see me as refusing to move on, so they consider me the troublemaker. They told me they've overlooked prior misdeeds from other siblings, like forging college degrees, stealing, etc. So they think I should do the same with Ash. The difference is, Ash never truly apologized to me, only to Ted. That does nothing for me. Nor have I asked him for financial compensation for the numerous items he soiled and destroyed. I never even thought about that at the time. But it's definitely a big reason I resent him so strongly. Regardless, I am not budging. Ted, on the other hand, is extremely caring and hates seeing anyone suffer, so he is torn, but he has never forced me to accept Ash either. Yes, the jokes in the comments saying I should put puppy training pads, or a litter box in the guest room are hilarious. I actually have imagined that in passing. And no, I would never upload the video evidence publicly, because that is too humiliating. I only filmed it to show Ted proof of what happened, because it's almost unbelievable. Ted, in turn, shared it only with his parents and 2 older brothers so they would understand we were not fabricating the story. Beyond that, I want no more drama. Edit number 2, a short mini update. Some of Ted's other brothers apparently stumbled upon my post, or were shown screenshots, and the aftermath has been explosive. It turns out certain older siblings had no clue about the extent, or the specifics of what Ash did to me. They believed it was a short-lived accident. Now that they know it was systematic, repeated, and undeniably intentional, they are outraged. A few of them decided to come to our area in order to deal with the situation or talk to us. Meanwhile, I have also received hateful private messages from random strangers who say vile things, like that I must have wanted it, or asked for it. That is both disgusting and insane. To those people, I almost wish the P-man would invade their home and douse their possessions. Anyway, I'm grateful for the majority of folks who have shown me empathy and comedic relief. I still might keep a litter box in the guest room if I am ever forced to accommodate him, though I doubt I will. Again, thanks for reading this saga. I will keep responding to comments as time allows. Update number 1, here's a major development. Many commenters advised me to share my full post with Ted, so he would truly comprehend how the internet at large viewed his family's behavior. So I did. And it was eye-opening for him. After reading hundreds of comments, he apologized countless times, recognizing he and his family had handled things poorly, especially regarding how I was left feeling. He then declared there was no chance Ash would move into our home after all, which was validating to hear. Because Ted is an engineer with a decent professional network, he also tried to help Ash find an alternate job somewhere else. He contacted a colleague who told him Ash hadn't been fired from his last job, but had rather quit on his own, which Ted found infuriating. He felt Ash had misrepresented himself as a victim. With that fresh anger, Ted drove 2 hours to confront him in person. Since I work 2 jobs, one daytime, one evening, I was not around to see that confrontation. But what Ted relayed back to me was surreal. Apparently Ted got to Ash's apartment, and Ash was not there. Ted let himself in using a spare key, for emergencies, that he still had. He waited for a while, eventually needed the bathroom, discovered the guest bathroom was locked, so he ventured into Ash's master bathroom. And what he found was, in Ted's words, a horrifying situation. So horrifying, in fact, that he immediately called me to say, "Do not come here, stay away." He said he needed to reach out to other family members for help. About 2 hours later, the wife of brother number 8 called me, sobbing, asking if I was physically and mentally okay. She told me that apparently an avalanche of additional secret information about Ash was coming to light. Not only was Ash peeing on my pictures and items, but he had also plastered images of me around his bathroom, with visible traces of bodily fluids like semen. This was horrifying beyond measure. Worse, he had included pictures of a 14-year-old niece, brother number 1's daughter, and those images, too, were defiled with disgusting fluids. The dog from the original house was not there, but the cat, Sunny, was discovered trembling under the bed, extremely malnourished and also soiled with urine and other fluids. Ted, absolutely horrified, reached out to brother number 6, who told him to wait until they could locate Ash, because they worried about a possible confrontation. Meanwhile, brother number 1 threatened to kill Ash for involving his daughter that way. My mother-in-law got wind of it all, broke down in tears, and confessed that when Ash was young, he had endured relentless bullying from many older brothers. She felt she had failed to protect him. She admitted to pressuring Ted to stay close to Ash over the years in hopes that Ash would remain stable. Obviously, she had no idea Ash's mental state was this disturbed. Later, Ted told me that Ash's place looked like something out of a nightmare, photo albums with my image cut out, scratched, or otherwise defaced. The wedding album from our ceremony, which was supposed to be at the parents' home, was found in Ash's bedroom, drenched in vile substances, and the cat cowered under the bed in fear. Ted called me, apologizing over and over for letting me get dragged into this. I told him I was driving over because someone needed to care for Sunny, who was obviously in dire shape. Ted begged me not to come, worried about my emotional well-being. However, as I was en route, our home doorbell camera alerted me to a flower delivery. The card, addressed to me, was apparently from Ash. It said something ominous, like I had shared personal information online, and therefore anything that occurred would be my responsibility. I began sobbing in my car, pulled over, and lost it. I ended up calling my sister, who convinced me to drive to her house instead of confronting Ash. Meanwhile, Ted rescued Sunny, and I found out how truly traumatic the cat's condition was. She was severely dehydrated and had injuries or infection that needed immediate vet care. I suddenly felt as if my entire life had become some twisted horror film. Soon, some of Ted's older brothers, #3, number 4, and number 8, showed up at Ash's place, and apparently there was a violent confrontation. Punches were thrown, shouting ensued, and someone landed in the ER. Eventually, they managed to have Ash placed on a psychiatric hold. My mother-in-law continued calling people, lamenting that she had wanted the whole family together, and that we ruined everything by not forgiving him. Meanwhile, Ted decided he was done with half of his family. He recognized that a chunk of them had created, or allowed the toxic environment that produced Ash's destructive behavior. I felt numb. The next blow came when we discovered from the veterinarian that Sunny's kidneys had deteriorated. She was so far gone, the kindest option was to euthanize her. The abuse had gone on for too long. I still tear up anytime I think about that sweet cat. Brother number 1's daughter, the 14-year-old, was put into therapy. As far as we know, Ash hadn't physically harmed or confronted her in person, but merely used her image. That's still extremely disturbing, though apparently he was channeling rage toward brother number 1, who was one of the biggest bullies in Ash's childhood. Regardless, it showed a horrifying disregard for boundaries, especially involving a minor. Meanwhile, Ted and I decided to remain married. I had no interest in retaliating or humiliating Ash further. Like I said, no revenge peeing. I just wanted them all away from me. Ted felt profound guilt for not recognizing how troubled Ash was. I haven't received any direct apology from Ash, but I no longer even want one. The entire situation is so overwhelmingly painful that I'm not sure an apology would mean much anymore. Update number 2, a smaller note. Roughly a couple of months have passed since the fiasco, and a number of you have shown deep concern for my mental state, or asked for updates. Thank you for that. I've thought a lot about some comments that suggested Ted's mom might herself be a victim of manipulation or abuse. That may be accurate. However, she still did a terrible job protecting not only me, but even her own children. She is the one who tried to smooth everything over rather than dealing with underlying issues. Where do we stand? I'll try to summarize. Various family members have apologized. Some are in therapy themselves, acknowledging that their childhood dynamic was severely warped and that the older brothers inflicted major emotional or physical harm on Ash, going far beyond normal sibling rivalry. The mother's reaction was to bury her head in the sand. That ignorance or denial let Ash's resentment and mental health problems fester, ultimately exploding in the vile behaviors we discovered. Ted, for his part, is devastated by guilt. He has apologized to me many times for not demanding that Ash pay for the items he ruined or for not confronting him sooner. Everyone's emotions are all over the place. Some siblings basically want to cut Ash out forever. Others think he's sick and deserves compassion. I find it all disorienting, to put it mildly. Personally, I had to walk away from my old job, partly from the stress. I found a new job that is better for my mental health. I blocked or minimized contact with most of Ted's extended family, aside from a few who are supportive or genuinely remorseful. My cat, Tortilla, remains my beloved companion, giving me comfort after everything. It sounds silly, but sometimes I just cry into her fur, letting out months of frustration. She is at least safe and healthy. People keep joking that I should greet Ash with puppy training pads if he ever tries to come over. But no, I will never let him through my front door. Thank you again for the comedic relief. It helps me from completely losing my sanity. Update number 3, Tokyo Drift might be a playful label for another wave of revelations, but that's how it feels. A constant drift into new territory. Almost 2 months have elapsed since we first discovered the horrifying depths of Ash's behavior, and in that time, I have fielded many personal messages. People are curious, worried, or just plain astonished. Let me try to address some key points. 1. Ted and I remain together as a couple at this point, but our bond has been tested severely. We are both in individual therapy, with the possibility of couples therapy if our therapists decide it would help. Ted is constantly apologizing for, in his view, failing to protect me. 2. Ash is still presumably in psychiatric care. We haven't spoken to him. Some of the family knows more, but they're not telling me much, and frankly, I don't want to know. 3. The mother-in-law is angry, claiming that she can forgive everyone else for worse things, so we should forgive Ash's one-time meltdown. She sees me as an outsider, who has caused drama. 4. I have effectively minimized contact with most of the in-laws. My mental health can't handle further complications. I'm working on self-care, including therapy, journaling, and focusing on my job. 5. Sunny, the cat Ash neglected, remains a heartbreaking memory of how we all let something slip under the radar until it was too late. That guilt is heavy, though the rational part of me knows I was never let inside Ash's life enough to realize how bad it was. Some people demanded more detail on what the older brothers did to Ash that was so dreadful it warped him. From tidbits I gathered, it went beyond mere bullying, humiliations, locking him outside, physically dragging him, etc. He was singled out by half of them. Ted sometimes defended him, ironically making Ash see Ted as both protector and borderline obsession. It's a tragedy, but it doesn't excuse the vile ways he targeted me or a teenage girl's photos. No, we didn't see it coming. Ash was seemingly a calm, stable guy. He had a good job, an engineering degree, and even a pet he presumably cared for. The pandemic isolation may have exacerbated or triggered his issues. If there had been no lockdown, maybe he would have kept living a normal public life, continuing to bury his traumatic past until something else set him off. Who can say? Right now, I'm living day to day, focusing on small positives. I try to celebrate the little things that make life worth living, such as a nice conversation with a friend, a good meal, or a purring cat in my lap. My therapist says it's healthy to find gratitude in small steps. Thank you all for your messages of support. It's amazing how random internet strangers can uplift you with jokes and kind words. Update number 4, Return to P-Town, is a label that might suggest an epic conclusion, though real life doesn't tie everything up neatly. Nearly a full year has passed since the day I uncovered Ash peeing on my clothes, and in that time, so much has unraveled that I don't even know where to start. Some folks demanded a true finale, so here's the best I can give. Ted asked me for a divorce. We had an emotional discussion, many tears, and eventually, I realized he was dead set on the idea that I'd be better off without him. He believed I had gone through unimaginable distress because of his family, and he didn't want me exposed to anything like that again. Even if I insisted I wanted to stay, he felt too guilty. So, yes, we are now divorced. It was crushing to sign those papers, but we did so respectfully, hugging each other afterwards. I still love him, and he says he loves me. It's just that the level of trauma overshadowed everything. We remain on friendly terms, unbelievably enough. He calls me sometimes, or I message him. We talk about random daily life. It's painful, but also heartening to see that we can be supportive friends even if we're no longer spouses. The siblings. Some apologized for piling on me, some apologized for not intervening earlier, and some maintain that I'm overreacting. Number 1 ended up relocating to the East Coast, taking his entire family with him, presumably seeking a fresh environment. Number 6 remains the brother I feel closest to. He showed me genuine compassion, calling me his little sister even after the divorce. Number 5 never liked me, and that is not going to change. Number 2 and number 3 offered heartfelt apologies that I tentatively accepted. Some of them are in therapy, or so I hear. Everyone is disillusioned with the mother, who apparently concealed a lot about Ash's mental health. I have no direct communication with her anymore, and I prefer it that way. As for Ash, word has it he was confined to a psychiatric facility, then eventually relocated to the West Coast under supervision. I have no desire for further contact, especially after seeing all the horrid things he did. I wish him healing in the abstract sense, but at a large distance from me. Meanwhile, I lost a big chunk of what felt like my family, because I used to think of Ted's brothers as part of my own circle. That's gone now, a casualty of the fiasco. My own job changed, I found a more fulfilling position, and I live alone with my cat, Tortilla, who remains my beloved companion. She purrs whenever I'm sad, which is more helpful than I ever would have guessed. My old life is in ruins, but I'm slowly building something new. Update number 5, P and Tell No Tales. Months trickled by, and life settled into a new normal. People kept sending me messages on social media, or on the original forum, worried or curious. Over the holidays, I found myself alone with Tortilla. I didn't attend my family's big Christmas party. I just didn't feel up for forced cheer. Ted called me on Christmas Day, but for once, I ignored his call, which felt oddly empowering. Later, he sent a text checking whether I was okay. Honestly, I felt that old tug in my chest, but I forced myself to let it be for a few hours. Some of you reading may insist that I need to cut him off entirely. But in truth, he was my best friend for so long, someone who knew me better than I knew myself at times. It's not so easy to sever that. I realize we can't be spouses, but maybe we can still be in each other's orbits, in a smaller capacity. Still, I have tried to move forward. I discovered random things about myself, like that I actually prefer comedic, or dramatic films over high-octane action blockbusters, something I never realized, because Ted loved action flicks. It's bittersweet, discovering the parts of me that were overshadowed by the relationship. I'm also learning to do mundane tasks alone, like changing a flat tire, or running errands. I realized I disliked mopping floors enough that I got a fancy robot mop. My cat has warmed to living with just me. We have our quiet routine. I still carry trauma from hearing the sound of urine hitting water, something that used to trigger horrifying flashbacks of Ash. My therapist suggested white noise or headphones in the bathroom, which I'm using. Life is bizarrely complicated. There's little news about Ash, or the rest of Ted's family. Ted keeps minimal contact with them, I believe. I suspect Ash remains in some kind of mental health program, but I prefer to keep my distance. Right now, all I can do is rebuild my peace. Work has been a bright spot, my boss is sympathetic, and my co-workers are fun. I do not feel ready to date again. I want to figure out who I am as a single individual for the first time in nearly a decade. Thank you to everyone who reached out with encouraging words, or funny jokes about cat lovers, or P-vengeance. You have no idea how much it lifts my spirits on dark days. Update number 6, Return of the Plan. Another year has come and gone. I sincerely hope you're all doing well, hugging your pets and living your best life. Some folks from TikTok apparently stumbled onto my story, so to them, hi, and thanks for caring. Let me do a final rundown of everything that's happened since the last update. Life was settling into a calmer rhythm, or so I thought. I got a new job that gave me joy. I spent time with my parents and sisters. I tended to small houseplants, though many died, including my beloved Basil. I tried going on a date once, set up by a friend, but it felt off. Then, out of nowhere, brother number 6 reached out, panicked, saying none of the siblings could get through to Ted. Ted had cut them off for personal reasons, but number 6 sensed something was seriously amiss. I texted Ted, got no response, so number 6 ended up traveling here to check on him. He found Ted in a self-destructive spiral, drinking heavily, ignoring daily life. One day, while number 6 stepped out briefly, he came back to find Ted nearly unresponsive. Ted landed in the hospital, presumably from alcohol poisoning or an intentional overdose. My heart dropped when number 6 told me. I realized maybe that was part of why Ted had divorced me, he was spiraling, and he didn't want me dragged down with him. At least that's my speculation. After stabilizing at the hospital, Ted went to a treatment center for a while. He refused to see me in person, but he began writing me emails, raw, emotional, and stream of consciousness. He apologized for worrying me, for divorcing me in such an abrupt manner, for the entire fiasco with his family. Some emails were furious rants at the universe. Others were nostalgic, referencing old trips we took. A couple were heartbreakingly sweet, calling me by an old nickname. Eventually, I broke his rule and replied, telling him I was still here for him if he needed a friend, that I understood he was hurting. He wrote more. Over a span of weeks, we corresponded daily, reminiscent of how we used to talk on Facebook Messenger back in our early college days. It was bittersweet. Eventually, Ted returned home, looking better physically, with brother number 3 staying at his place to help out. Ted started taking medication for depression, found a local support group, and set firmer boundaries with his more toxic siblings. He went low contact or no contact with many of them, but reconnected partially with number 3, number 4, and number 6, who were always more compassionate. His job placed him on temporary leave for mental health reasons, but after some months, he returned. We met up a few times, either with friends or alone, and I was relieved to see him healthier and calmer. He even adopted an elderly cat named Socks, though he keeps trying to rename it Macbeth. Tortilla is uncertain about this bigger cat, but she's thrilled to see Ted, who used to be her favorite cuddle buddy. Meanwhile, my life was hammered by natural disasters. 2 hurricanes came through our region, causing my apartment to flood. I had to replace floors, furniture, and appliances. Ironically, the last 2 pairs of shoes from the original P incident were also ruined by floodwater. I tried saving them, but it was too late. Perhaps that was symbolic, a forced letting go of the past. Insurance covered some of it, but not nearly enough, and I ended up selling the place. I moved back in with my parents while searching for a new apartment in a safer building. It was depressing seeing how little I owned after discarding water-damaged items, but it's also a chance for a fresh start. My cat is flexible as long as she has me, so we carry on. Amidst the chaos, I received a surprise letter from Ash. Initially, I expected that it might be threatening, but to my shock, it was an apology. He admitted everything, how he had harbored deep resentment, how he was jealous of the connection I shared with Ted, how he manipulated situations to isolate Ted from me. He acknowledged that he ruined our marriage in many ways, yet he believed I was strong enough to rebuild my life. He expressed regret for being so cruel, and said he knew Ted had gone through severe emotional turmoil because of him. Although I was stunned, I didn't experience the terror I would have felt months earlier. I guess therapy helped me. But I haven't shown Ted the letter yet. Brother number 6 told me that might, or might not be helpful, depending on Ted's mental state. I might hold on to it for now, deciding later if I share it. This past Christmas, I finally went to my parents' place to celebrate. My sisters, in a loving gesture, each gave me a pair of shoes. They said it was to symbolize all the milestones and new paths in my life. They even included an empty shoe box for a future pair, letting me choose the next step on my own. It was the sweetest, most tear-inducing gift. Then on New Year's Eve, I ended up at a friend's party, not expecting to see Ted there, but he was. We chatted politely, drifted around socializing, until midnight approached. I found a quiet spot, away from the couples kissing, and Ted came over, resting his head on my shoulder in silent camaraderie. We watched the fireworks. In that moment, I felt a sense of acceptance. I will probably always love him, whether he's my husband, ex-husband, or simply my friend. We talked about how we're both healing. He's not in a place to rekindle our marriage, and I'm also not sure if that's what I want. But for now, we can offer each other a gentle form of companionship. Some say I'm foolish, that I should cut him out for good, but I choose to be happy. Our bond was never about toxicity between us. Our downfall was his family's darkness, and the heartbreak that followed. In the end, life isn't perfect. I still have triggers, still have therapy sessions. Yet, I'm in a better place than before. Ted is too. For all of you who have supported me, made me laugh with cat puns, or told me to keep going, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. You can never underestimate the kindness of strangers, or the power of empathizing with someone's bizarre personal saga. May you find random money in your pockets, experience the perfect coffee brew, enjoy your beloved pets, and discover that even after the darkest storms, there is a sunrise eventually. I love all of you who took the time to read this unbelievably long journey. That's everything for now. Ellie and Tortilla, signing off.